Running Sentences presents The Drawn Out Fight, Part 1. The Desert Town. On the hunt for his brother, Vass has traveled to the mostly abandoned desert town of Black Rock, all on the rumor that one of his brother's associates might be in town. This is a work of fiction. It is inspired by the manga Trigun. There are several similarities between the two, but I have made a lot of differences as well. If you wish to classify this as fan fiction, that might be what it's best named as. Copyright 2022. Michael Henry. All rights reserved. The puttering, open-topped vehicle that Vass had to get to this town was not in great shape. No matter how hard or softly he pressed the gas pedal, it didn't want to move. It did what it wanted, an even speed, with the speedometer broken, as well as the gas gauge broken and practically everything else in this vehicle. It was just sort of coasting along. The radio did work, but didn't, since he crossed a swath of desert that went and went for miles of brown sand-like stuff that crossed much of this planet. No radio towers were strong enough out here on this crashed-out planet to send out a signal. His only company consisted of a couple of flasks of water, which were also running out. Despite all of this, Vass sat back in the vehicle in the driver's seat, enjoying the trip, letting the miles go by. Black Rock came into view on the dusty road after a few hours had gone by. It was set under a big overhang of a rock that was near a plateau that rose up suddenly in the desert. It was also very, very black. Vass grimaced at the sight, wondering if the people were ever afraid that something that big might just suddenly drop down onto the town. Then decided that it wasn't worth thinking about, because if it did, they wouldn't have much time to think about it. So he concentrated on actually getting to this town itself, since his vehicle was making more noises than was comfortable. He wrestled it the final way, just past the welcome sign to town, which only half existed and half shot away. In fact, only the rock part of the sign still existed as his vehicle got past that and gave up in a coughing fit and just quit where it was. Vass found himself 10 feet short of a nearby parking space near a hotel, but no one seemed to have vehicles here, so he wondered if it would be okay if he could just leave it undisturbed, since no one was around. But there were a few people were out and about on this dirt and wood shackle town, though they looked uninterested that a stranger had come to town, which was fine with Vass. He didn't really want attention, even though it might do him some good. He'd gotten out of the car, stretched around looking for anyone friendly. They still weren't paying attention to him, and then, since no one came to greet him, he grabbed his bag out of the back and headed towards the nearby building with a faded sign that read Hotel. He stopped in front of the door to this place outside, where a couple of old men were falling over a game board with a mishmash of pieces that didn't seem to go together into the game that they were playing. He wasn't sure what game it was, but it just looked wrong. He cleared his throat. Gentlemen. None looked up from the board. Yes, what is it? Yes, what is it? Yes, what is it? Yes, what is it? I was wondering and hoping if you could tell me if this place has rooms for the night. Nobody comes here, so yes. It's a bar and breakfast. Get all the drink you want in the morning to night. Best place in town and the only one in town since people have been leaving. I see, thank you. He didn't ask about why they were leaving, as he suspected that he already knew the reason. His brother's associate had come to town. It was odd that it didn't seem to bother them by hinting at such things, though, since death followed those who spoke out about such associates. Maybe that was their reason. Vass would narrow his eyes, studying the men and trying to get a feel. There was something there that wasn't right, but he couldn't tell just by sight. So with a sigh, he turned and went through the door. The dust and dirt swirled about as the door opened to reveal a worn-down bar that had seen better years a long time ago. Vass would take a short look around, noting that there was another group of old men in the corner, gathered around a game board. There seemed to be plenty of room in here for two groups playing different games, or maybe playing the same game. So why weren't there two groups in here? Didn't seem like it was wise to have one group outside and one group inside when the weather was so harsh and beating down with that sun. The only real difference would be that outside there was light to see, as in here was rather dimly lit. He eyed the group for a second longer, and as they felt so similar to the one outside, but shook his head. It was probably his imagination having fun, but maybe not. Vass would stroll his way over to the bar where a bell and book sat. He gently tapped the bell, since no one was tending the bar. The door in the back room swung open as a big woman came in, arms aflutter in an uproar of having been disturbed. "What is this? Who rings my bell?" This came to a stop when she saw him leaning against the bar with both eyebrows raised at her. "What do we have? A man in a long, dusty jacket and a hat that doesn't quite fit his head. A customer's a customer, though, so as long as you aren't here to cause trouble, and you are willing to pay." Vass flashed a smile. Trouble, he felt, he wouldn't cause unless it was called for. He hoped that he could travel through town with no problems, but he was also here to find someone, and that generally led to trouble. He didn't have high hopes. Yes, I am a customer, searching for a room for the night, and to know a few things if you don't mind." "What things, pray tell?" "If Black Rock has a car mechanic, and who the town sheriff is, that's all I want. And of course the hotel room, if it's possible. I'm not here to cause trouble, per se." "People looking for the sheriff are always causing trouble. What do you have to say to that?" "Do you have many people come through here asking for the police?" "No, we do not, but it raises suspicion when someone does." "Well, all I want to do is talk to him to see if anyone bad has come through town. You hear rumors about these sorts of things, and you want to feel safe. That's not so bad, is it?" The woman looked over him doubtfully as he stood up from his lean and began fishing out coins from his pocket. He slapped down a few dollars and a handful of coins after looking at what he'd drawn out with his hand. "If you don't want to give me information, that's fine. I'll go find it myself. But here's some money for the room." "Cool your words, mister. It ain't no trouble in telling you that you can find that man, that sheriff man, in the center of town. Can't miss the sheriff's building, as it is the one nice few ones in town left. As for a room, follow me, and I'll show you to the best of the best rooms in the city." She deftly came around the bar, having made the money vanish first, of course, and led him off to the side of this establishment. Through a door and up a flight of stairs they would go, with the owner taking up all of the walking space, so Vass could only dutifully follow her. There was no getting around. They eventually wound up at the third door on the left of the hallway atop the stairs, and in a small room. It was quaint enough, pastel bedspread that had faded, and there were lots of wood-looking pieces of furniture. He noted that there was one window which stared out towards the stone plateau of the jutting rock that covered the town. On the bright side, it was cool in here, and it didn't seem like a place would ever get hot, thanks to being under the shade of the rock. About the sheriff?" He turned to the door to see that the owner had already left him alone. Vass raised an eyebrow at this, since she had said she would tell him where the sheriff was, although she had given him a hint, and then dropped it, since it was better to just settle in for now. He did not consider looking for the nicest building in the center of town to be the greatest of directions, but with a sigh he knew it would have to do. He tossed his bag onto the bed and checked the inner pockets of his jacket to make sure he'd put his pistols away. They were there, and he tapped both of them to make sure they felt right. Old memories flooded to him from the touch of going back to he and his brother marching through the desert, from small little place to small little place, trying to see if civilization was coming along. Vass shook his head at the thoughts. Things were different now, and there wasn't time for the past. Hopefully the town of Blackrock would provide some answers as to the future of the world. He made a quiet exit of the hotel and bar, finding himself out on the street. He wondered if the road he'd found himself walking along was the main street, or if it would be another, just off-road that happened to come into town. There didn't seem to be many roads in and out of this place, but there were plenty of rumors that it once been a bustling mine town, so there should be some. Where had that town gone was also a question he was wondering about. All he could see were buildings that had some life left to them, but had been left to rot by whatever businesses were still operating inside. He kept an eye out as he began his walk, passing by one after another, none of these places standing out because they were all ordinary businesses. The one thing bothered him, though, was everyone seemed to be avoiding him, as the few people around him were busy tending to whatever they were attending to, but there was almost a 10-foot circle about him where people seemed to move out of his way just to avoid him. Even those that came out of stores not far from him hurried away when they saw him there, keeping that 10-foot distance all around. They did stare towards him, though, not angry or hateful, or even curious, or more like they were dead eyes, and there was nothing behind them. Vass kept walking towards the next road, loudly stepping on the wood path to tell people he was coming. A few minutes down the road, he came to one clean-looking building and stopped. There were a few wanted posters plastered on an outside board here. The walls of the building were painted a fantastic white to offset the black etched and painted sign that said Sheriff up top of the 2-story stone structure. Vass cast a glance about. The distance remained the same for the people, and everything else had remained in a desolate state. That 10-foot distance was still there. All he could do was shake his head at the sight, take off his cap, and head inside, so that's what he did. The door swung open and clattered shut when he let it go. The mostly empty lobby of this place looked nice on first impressions. It had plenty of chairs for anyone who wanted to sit down in a clean space, per se, from the looks of things. The only person there appeared to be a janitor, as they were sweeping away some dust that had gotten into the place. Vass stepped further in, moving towards the janitor while keeping an eye out for anything off. This town had an odd feeling to it, and he did not want to be caught off guard. "Excuse me, I'm looking for the sheriff. Do you know where he is?" A glance up from the weary eyes of the janitor told him that something definitely wasn't right here. "Meeting the mayor right now." "Is that here, or is that somewhere else? Could you point me in a direction?" "You expect the mayor to come down here? Even as clean as I keep this office, that foul jerk won't step one step into town." "I'll go to them, then. Where exactly are they?" "Edge of town, near the base of the plateau, up on a hill overlooking this place. You can't miss it. Take a right on the intersection road and walk straight. You'll find hell there, though." "Okay, thanks. By the way, if there's something wrong, you can tell me. I don't mind listening to people's problems." "A stranger? Ha! Like they'll tell you anything. They all know everything that goes on here, but they won't talk. Not a single person will talk. Can't get a word past them. Best to just leave." "My car broke down, and I'm where I want to be at the moment, so I'm not going to leave." The janitor shook his head and went back to sweeping. He had nothing more to say, so Vass turned and shrugged and headed out the door. He came out and began walking a couple of steps towards this intersection he'd been told about. The group of people who had kept their distance had all disappeared, leaving him alone on this road. To Vass it didn't matter, though the strangeness going on here could be excused, since people acted off when rumors about towns began to swirl about the town. He'd been to a couple of towns like this, and it took a while for people to warm up to him or anyone. He was already at the intersection, and to his right was the straight road that had been mentioned, and a variety of buildings that all looked in bad shape. Some 200 yards down this road, though, gently sloping upward, would lead to a grand old wooden house at the end of it, with a metal, menacing gate protecting it. Vass began the hike towards it, expecting it to be a quiet walk, and it was. A mere 15 minutes later, he was at the gate to this house, which he pushed open. He hadn't been walking with any urgency, and took his time taking in everything. There were some gasps from people behind him, no doubt the citizenry surprised that someone would dare cross some invisible line that he should not have crossed. He pushed onward, ignoring them as he walked up the little path that cut back and forth between the front door and the gate, and led to a set of steep stairs up to that door. He wondered if this was supposed to be imposing to look at. To him it felt a bit silly and over the top to have a path that cut to the left, and then the right, and then the left again, when it could have just been straight. He was at the front door soon and knocking on it to tell the people inside they had company. He could find no bell to ring, so he stood there waiting, and slowly the door would creak its way open. "Come in, sir." Not one to turn down an invitation, he did exactly that. He had to turn to the side to shuffle through the door, as it wasn't opened any further for him to get inside, and a bit of sucking in his stomach helped ease matters as he got into the house. Vass would enter a foyer and had no time to look around it. "If you'll follow me." The butler had already begun moving towards the door on his left, while Vass took a second to try and collect himself in that dim lit space, and then walked slowly after the butler. A library was where he found himself next, and Vass was directed towards a nearby, overly plush chair to sit down in. He took it and sat down, looking at the man, waiting for some sign of what was to come. "What brings you to Mayor Corbin's house?" "I wanted to meet the sheriff, and I was told he was here. I'm here about some rumors. I can make them go away for a price." "Understood. Please wait here." The man went off somewhere, and once the door clicked shut, Vass was back on his feet. He wandered towards a nearby bookshelf, where rows and rows of books were stuck on shelves on the wall, and he was looking them over. Botany, behavioral studies, bookends. They all seemed rather smart books, but dusty ones. Perhaps they'd never been read, or read once and then, in some crazy memorization skill, allowed the owner to know what was in them. But if that was the case, why keep the book? His slow gait about the place was interrupted when the door was thrown open and two men bustled in. One was rather rotund, and the other skinny, and wore two old-fashioned stars up on his shoulders. They were both dressed well, or better than the citizens had been. "You're the man who wanted to meet with us?" "He wanted to meet with me, Corbin, about getting rid of these rumors." "Such things still involve me, Dale. Don't go thinking you can run this town because you have a gun." Vass approached, offering his hand, with the feeling that neither man would take it up to shake it. When they spotted him and his offer, they both shook their heads no, and Corbin, the big one, turned his head away. "Nice to meet you two. I'm Vass, and I deal with eliminating things that are causing problems for people. Rumors, mostly, and, figures of the night, let's say." "You think you'll be able to eliminate a doll?" "All I need is one night to do it, and I will eliminate it." The sheriff, Darrell, scoffed at him and shook his head no. He didn't believe him. On the other hand, though, the mayor looked rather interested in what he had to say. "If you don't succeed, I won't pay, and I don't pay up front. These figures of the night, which we are calling dolls, show up at the church every midnight and stalks the streets looking for prey. So if you can capture it and kill it, or capture it and keep it alive, show it to me, I will pay. Good luck." The mayor grabbed the sheriff and left the room, with Vass's hand, still unshaken, being held out. He put it away with a shrug. The town church. Why was that such a thing? It didn't take much to find the run-down place that was a church. It was one of the few buildings that was raised above 2 stories here. His problem then became wasting away time by finding some food and then a good spot to hide out. Midnight rolled around slowly, and by that time he'd parked himself at the front door of the place. If the doll was going to appear out here all on its own, that made life easier. He found himself looking out at the now empty dust bowl of a town where sand rolled through when a small breeze decided it wanted to blow through. It was a calm and peaceful night, which was the way it needed to be if there was to be a fight. Vass made sure his jacket was open and allowed him easy access to his guns and felt both of them to be careful. A glow began to appear from the alleyway behind the church and walked out into the promenade that connected the south side of the small town with the north side. The figure, a small, ghastly white thing, seemed to be floating along with 2 sighs in its hands. "The doll of my brother. I believe they call you Smitten, a lost child, and one who kills in a rage." He came away from the front door of the church, his right hand reaching for his gun to pull it out, and did so. The doll had slowly turned towards him.
"That would make you Vass."
"Yes, that would." He raised his gun and fired at the doll, but the doll disappeared the second he squeezed the trigger. He jumped back, figuring that the creature was only about half his size, was going to come charging towards him. It didn't, instead having moved to the right a few feet from where it had been, its face pale in the moonlight, which could have been angelic, except for the sneer and red eyes made that angelic image go away. "You want me to waste bullets on you, then thinking you can charge in? Silly and smart. Pity I learned about you from some files my brother left lying around. Now, what are you doing here of all places?"
"Why, you know why already. Why don't you visit your brother? I'm sure he'll remind you exactly why."
"I would, but he doesn't want to be found. So I have to deal with you creatures to get to him. Works out well, since that's part of your purpose, I guess. I destroy a few of you, and he knows I'm coming for him." The doll, Smitten, began swaying from side to side. It was slight at first, when she began to talk to him again. Now it was more obvious and pronounced. It would only take a blink of an eye, and she would pounce. He wondered if she had the rage necessary for a straightforward attack. If there wasn't rage, then she wouldn't be able to go as fast as she could, potentially. But where would he get his opportunity to strike her? He ran through some ideas in his head, with none of them sounding pleasing or doable. He would need some luck for any idea to work, and it would need to come soon for him. All he had right now was staring down the sights of a pistol and hoping she wouldn't move.
"Problem?"
"Take a wild guess." She moved to her left, not quickly, and he kept his gun aimed at her, but it took him a second to realize she wasn't going to attack. No, she was headed towards the buildings of the city and the back streets. He took a second, trying to figure out if he should follow or not. If he did, she would have an advantage of operating in the shadows of these alleyways and streets that he did not know. He also had a job to do. With it not completely settled in his mind as to what to do, he gave chase. Into a back alleyway they went. He tried to keep the glowing, pale, light figure in front of him as they went. It wasn't easy with the debris and garbage that piled up back on these alleyways. He tucked his pistol back into its holster as he moved. There would be little chance to shoot, and she probably would not give him a clear line of sight to do it anyway. Smitten turned down another alleyway to the left, and then, with the distance between them growing as she could probably use it to her advantage, Vass came to a stop at the edge of the building where the intersection of an alleyway came to be. He peeked around the corner, trying to get a feel for what was there. Trash, and no sign of a doll, which wasn't good. He pulled at his coat, making sure it covered him, as it was going to be his last line of defense against those blades. There was no use in trying to get his guns out. No sight of her, and no sight of what he could shoot. So with a sigh, and taking a breath, he moved around this edge. Entering this alleyway, Vass kept looking about, waiting for Smitten to try and drop on him. His footsteps were careful to make sure he was on solid ground and not stepping on garbage itself. With his luck, the doll had hidden herself amongst that stuff and would be waiting for a wrong step to put a scythe through his boot. "Smitten, you don't have to hide from me. I'm right here willing to fight you." He snickered to himself at the thought that the idea might have worked. It didn't have a chance of working in these dry, sandy times that just kept tumbling onward. But he had to try something.
"Only a fool would talk before dying."
The hiss of words came to his left, and he instantly went to his knee, crouched down, ready to throw a punch, as he tried to protect his face by bringing his arms into a boxing pose. He stayed down for a second, looking for the glow of the doll, but nothing appeared. "I could say the same to you, Smitten. Besides, I'm not the one who's currently afraid to attack."
"You know nothing."
There is certainly an argument for that fact, but I'll be kind and ask you specifically what I don't know. I know there are some mysteries to me about my brother and myself, and to what you dolls and how he made you. This planet is another thing I don't get, even after having traveled its length and width. So, doll, what don't I know that you know?" There was another hiss to his left, and he eyed the area carefully. He didn't move much in case something would pop out. There did appear to be a shadow moving up on top of the buildings, but he wasn't sure if it was Smitten or not. Could be a stranger. He didn't try his luck, so he concentrated his best on remembering her abilities that he'd read about. Anger, speed, and good with blades were all that was coming to him at the moment. Another look around made him feel unsafe, and he began moving towards the end of the alleyway carefully. She was going to strike soon, he felt, and it would be best not to be in a narrow space. A small road provided little comfort or room to operate as Vass came out onto it. He still kept his guns hidden under his coat and looked about for the doll. She still hadn't appeared, which was annoying, but if she wanted to hide, that was fine. She could chase him then, and since he was in her scent, she would have to chase. He took off down the road running, figuring she would follow in some way. A flurry of buildings went by, and he didn't bother to look them over. His eyes were set on the one with the sign loosely hanging in front of it that read Bank. While it was not a great spot to have a potential fight, it might do in a pinch. Giving Smitten room to run about was just going to get him hurt. Giving her narrow space wasn't great either, but in a medium-sized space, maybe he could equalize everything out. He glanced over his shoulder to see a bobbing shadow following him at some distance up on the roofs. The one thing he never had bothered to do and was now regretting was trying to figure out how smart these dolls were. He did fear being outsmarted, but that was a chance he would have to take at this moment. The bank itself was approaching quickly, and he slowed his pace, timing it so that he could turn right into it, since the door was somehow open. He came into the bank lobby and slowed down, trying to find some place to hide. It was not the medium space he was hoping for, instead a small one, divided by a counter with 2 cashier windows. Beyond was a rusty vault-looking thing planted against the back wall. It had the words vault on it, but why they were advertising that fact, he didn't bother guessing at. It was what it was. Instead, he went over towards the counter and lifted up the section that allowed workers behind it, and then decided to duck under it, not trusting it to open from the amount of rust that seemed to make this place its home. This will have to do, won't it? He got behind the counter and crouched behind it. She wanted him, probably, and now she would have to figure out a way in here, sneakily. His only fear was that she would have some power he was unaware of, and that would be his downfall. The sound of a nearby door creaking made him tense up.
"What's the matter? Did you suddenly forget how to fight?"
Not wanting to get drawn into revealing the position, he kept quiet and ducked under the counter. If he could figure out where she was before she did it to him, it would be great. Vass held his breath.
"Oh, please, with the quiet act. You're behind the counter, and all I have to do is come around to slice you up. It will be delicious. Just make it quicker by talking to me." She sounded like she was close to the gate at the counter that would allow the workers from one side to the other.
her voice giving him only hints as her footsteps made no noise. The sudden banging of her hands against metal bars separating the two sections did make him jump. He was under the counter now fully, trying to keep himself close to it where he could hide. But he kept moving, creeping inch by inch towards where he figured Smitten might come through. There was another jarring of the bars, this time to a little further away from him. A thunk followed, and he looked towards the noise just in time to see a scythe blade being pulled out of the thin wood not far from where his foot was. "I'm no fool, Vast, the man of 1,000 lives. The second I cross to your side of the bank, you're going to try and jump me. Why do you think so simply, Your brother made you seem smart when the last time I talked to him." There was another thunk of a blade coming closer as it punctured through the wall of the counter. Vast gulped and tried to keep his heart rate down. It was either live or die, and he had no intention of it being the second option. He lay down as close as he could towards the ground. Most dolls, granted I've only dealt with 2, stay in contact with their master. You aren't in contact with Rapier? So that means something has happened to you, doesn't it? You have to have a connection with someone in order to live. Shows what you know. The metal above him rattled as she slammed into it with her whole body. It creaked and sounded like it was giving way. It only took a second for Vast to realize it might swing around and trap him under the desk for a few seconds, allowing her stabby time. He rolled. The bars creaked and gave way, and then came swinging down as he predicted, followed by Smitten trying to hold on to them. She was a bit surprised to see him, but didn't waste any time and slashed with her blade in her right hand. Vast lifted his arm to block the blow as it came down on him heavily. The scythe bit into his arm, but did not penetrate his coat. There was surprise on Smitten's face as she tried to press down to draw blood, but the attack was going nowhere and had ground to a halt. "Welcome to your end." He tried to grab for her as she furiously swung her left-handed scythe towards him. That too was blocked by his other arm. The blows were now coming steadily as she swung her blades around and around until he finally was able to grab a hold of her, and then with his head-butted her, square in her head. The blow stopped her attacks, stunning her as the blades dropped from her hands. She lost consciousness from this blow. His hands moved to wrap around her neck. These creatures couldn't breathe, but they could use their mouths to feed on flesh. If they couldn't get their mouths on their victim, then they might die. He wasn't entirely sure that this would kill them, or how exactly the weirdness that came about of keeping dolls alive worked. But he was going to try this and see what happened. "Goodbye, Smitten. You are not a good doll." He held on tightly, knowing it would soon snap out of its stupor and begin trying to attack him once again. But with the blades on the ground, it would mostly be fists trying to stop him. She would come to a second later in a panicked flail that made her arms and legs go every which way. "What are you doing to me?" "Nothing much. Waiting for you to run out of energy, and then I shall remove the parts that make you tick." "I have learned to store energy for months since this town is lean on meat. You think you can hold me until the sun rises and sets again? Ha!" Her movements and flailing came to a stop with a victorious grin as if she had won. Vast shrugged and kept his grip tight. "I don't have to wait." A new panic set into the doll's face as she realized that something was terribly wrong. She raised her arm to swing a fist at him, but it barely moved, and more panic came to the doll's face. "How?" "Now, if I told you that, I'd need to know something in return, and I don't think you want to give information up for your life. Not when my brother could potentially find out." There was a feeble head-shake now, and then the doll slumped into lifelessness. Vast held on for a few more minutes before finally letting go, and with a clatter, the wood-figured doll went to the ground. It took a second wringing out his hand, which hurt from holding the once lifelike neck that had gone back to its wooden form. Pity you wouldn't talk, Smitten. I could have used some directions on where to go next. Oh well, to the road I go after I collect money from the idiots that run this town. As for how I did that, well, I'm guessing it's the same thing that's running through my brother that's creating you. Oh well. He now pulled out his pistol and fired 3 shots in quick succession into the chest of the doll. Then knelt down next to the doll, smashed away the rest of the wood with the butt of his gun. That would stop him from reaching inside the chest cavity. It was an empty wooden space, aside from 1 yellow crystal, which made him frown. There should be 3 in there, yet it was only 1. He shrugged, then stood up and dropped that crystal to the ground, with his boot heel smashing down on the spot where it landed a second later. A night's work completed. Stiffening a yawn, he headed back out of the bank to find his hotel room. He might be able to catch a few winks of sleep before morning came. All too quickly, that morning would come, and for some reason seemed to warm up his hotel room to uncomfortable levels. Vass woke up with the covers and sheets having been thrown off of the bed as he sweated and was too warm. He blinked a few times and tried to figure out where he was as the warm room was making it uncomfortable, so he got up and out of bed. Having managed to get out of his pants last night and just worn his long baggy shirt to bed, he now set about getting his stuff gathered up again. The pants, the jacket, and his holster. He carefully checked over it all before slipping the items on. The jacket unfortunately did have some small holes poked into the sleeve thanks to Smitten. A fact he sighed at because the tailor who'd made the jacket wouldn't be happy he had damaged it. Although it was designed to protect him, but couldn't do that without getting damaged from time to time. He shrugged. And lastly he threw on his guns from their hidden spot under the pillow and tucked them away in their holsters. It was time to get paid, and he would be on his way. Vass strolled down to the bar with the key in hand ready to return it, but upon getting into the bar room, he stopped, as the same 3 gentlemen from before sat there playing a game on the same old board. It was a strange sight, as there was nary a drink before them, and it just felt off. The owner came bustling around the bar counter, holding some mugs, and came barreling past him to give it to these old men. I'm returning your key to the room." The owner swung around and came over to him, snatching away the little copper key from his hand. "I hope you didn't mess the room up. It's the best room in town, and I don't need strangers messing up my good spaces." "I didn't." "And you came in late. Did I not tell you that customers should be in bed promptly after the sun sets?" "You didn't, and I was getting rid of your town's haunted issues, which are now, by the way, gone. Your town might live again if it is lucky." "Oh, why didn't you say so? This is grand news, and we should celebrate. I'll give you a drink on the house." Thank you, no. I need to get going as long as my car has been fixed by the local mechanic." He offered a polite wave of his hand and began heading towards the door. The thought came to him that he did say something to the effect of telling her that he was hunting dolls, right? Not explicitly, but searching for the sheriff and looking at rumors. That should have been enough to at least set off warning bells in one's mind that something was wrong. "Are you sure? I can give you plenty to drink, and I don't know if your vehicle got the good fix-up." He wasn't even aware if it had been moved, let alone that. He was already at the door and didn't want to turn down a free drink. It would be nice to celebrate doing something nice for a town. The fact was, though, something felt very off here still, and it wasn't the doll who'd made this situation. No, there was something else wrong, and drinking now would only get him caught up in something terrible. The feeling was running up and down his spine, so he pushed the door open and exited. Vass found his way back to the sheriff's office, and into Daryl's little office hidden away to the side of this place. The janitor had kindly pointed him in that direction, and he knocked on the door to get no response. It wasn't locked, so he pushed the door open to see the sheriff sitting at his desk with his feet up, head back, and snoring loudly. Vass stepped in, went over to the desk, knocking on the wood of it, and made the sheriff jump. "Damn it all! What's wrong with this town?" Not much now. Your creature, your demon of the night, is dead, by the way. Vass was being careful with what he said, because he had a feeling that there was definitely something still off about this place. He also did not want to drag any strangers into something that they didn't need to know about, if they were on the ups and were trustable. The sheriff glared at him, his hand on his revolver ready to draw it.
What you telling me for? The mayor's the one who's willing to pay you for your work.
You didn't seem to think it was possible. I came to tell you it was.
Why?
To see how you would react, and just to get a feeling for how things were here. The sheriff rose to his feet now and pointed towards Vass, who'd fixed the man with a crooked smile. Do you have a problem, Sheriff Darrell? Generally, sheriffs don't go around causing ruckuses for people just because they can.
You're some nobody stranger who wandered into town, says he killed a creature that was haunting us, all without any proof that this has been accomplished. Then strolls into my office and wants to tell me that they did what others cannot do. The only way dolls can be killed is by other dolls.
Vass dropped his grin. He had the potential, unfortunate answer to the puzzle to this town. It would still need to be confirmed, but it was not looking good. I see. Well, your accusation is not well-founded. Dolls are only killable by dolls is wrong. People can kill them if they know what they're doing. And I am not a doll, if that is what you're implying, but I think you're going to point your gun at me in a second and either kill me or take me to the mayor to have him do it. Which is it going to be? The sheriff had their gun out in a second and was being waved in a motion that meant him to go towards the door. Vass put up his hands and didn't reach for his own pistols and began moving towards it.
You think I would listen to that sycophant? I wouldn't take orders from him if I could, but I need him, so he stays for now. You, on the other hand, are much, much easier to get rid of. Now start marching.
Vass did as he was told. Their walk took him from the mayor's office down the street towards the mayor's place. The streets were empty of any life, aside from them allowing them to walk right down the middle of the road. Vass was a few feet ahead of the sheriff, who kept his gun on him. Do you mind if I ask a few questions?
No talking.
But if I don't talk, you can't find out how I beat the doll and how you might survive. And of course there's the nagging question in the back of your mind, is how does someone defeat one?
I don't know anything about that, and I don't care. I said shut up.
And yet you were the one who brought up dolls. Only a few people are in the know about them, and if you had that to hold above, say, a mayor, you could potentially become more powerful. Vass had stopped walking and lowered his arms, but they were still held up in a slight surrender pose. He began slowly turning towards the man. Of course, Sheriff Darrell, there is always the concept that you might be in league with that doll from before. The gun in the sheriff's hand barked, and the bullet rushed past Vass's ears. He flinched and frowned as a ringing noise now occupied that side of his head.
You better start moving and put your hands where I can see 'em.
What is wrong now? I'm giving you the chance to do what you wanted to do. Get rid of me. I'm out in the middle of a street. My hands not completely where they should be, but they're still visible. I'm giving you your best chance to kill me. What's wrong? He now fully turned to face the sheriff, who was sweating under the sun and looked rather uncomfortable. It was hot, but it wasn't terribly sweltering that would cause somebody to sweat a whole lot. Well, I see you're sweating now. That means you are what I think you are. What a terrible design flaw. And you're all sweat. Your fingers are slipping on that trigger of yours, and that, to me, says and points that you are a doll. Not a surprise, but a disappointing one. Did you control the girl, Smid? The gun in the sheriff's hand went off, but with a shaky hand the bullet flew off to the side. Darrell's other hand clamped down on his shaking hand, trying to steady it, but Vass drew his gun and fired 3 quick shots, hitting the man dead center in the chest. No blood spurted out, but chunks of wooden splintered and spewed from the wounds. It was over in that split second, no real fight occurring as the sheriff fell backwards. The gun Darrell had clattered away on the hard, packed dirt road when his hand hit the ground. Vass moved over there as quick as he dared. The last thing he wanted to do was to fall into a trap. But this doll lay on the ground, emotionless and empty of any look of living. It had turned wooden. Once again, he used the butt of his gun to knock away at the would-be chest cavity. Inside this wooden chamber were 2 crystals that he fetched out, pocketing one and then smashing the other under his foot when he got up. 3 crystals, 2 dolls. Something isn't right. But they might be able to share energy, or maybe they're growing. Oh well, at least I'll get money out of this. He soon arrived at the front door of the mayor's house in a foul mood. Things weren't adding up, and dealing with 2 dolls took a lot of energy. Plus, not having any breakfast, he could feel his stomach quietly rumbling in complaint. He also knew he needed to talk to the mayor. Money needed to be paid for services rendered. He knocked on the door and waited as it was opened by the butler, who merely stood to the side with the door fully open and allowing him in. The grand entrance of the house was quiet, with Vass's footsteps echoing even after he came to a stop in the middle of the foyer. "I take it you wish to see the mayor?" "Yes, please. He owes me some money." "Ah, you did the job then. Good. Follow me, please." They went towards a nearby staircase which led upwards. It was soon rushed into a home office that was splendid to look at, everything top-notch and excellently taken care of. Not a single thing could be said to look wrong in this room. There was, though, an acrid smell that seemed to occupy the area, which tainted it and came off of the mayor. All because the man was smoking as many cigarettes as possible, with no signs of stopping. Vass eyed the man, who eyed him back with a sickly look. Vass took the crystal from his pocket and held it up. "Your job is done, twice over. I should ask for double payment, but for you and your town, I'll keep it cheap. 300,000 gristled coins." "You killed the thing?" "I did, and another one who is controlling that creature, potentially. You need a new sheriff, by the way." "What?" "The sheriff was a creature who was helping the other creature hunt and kill. He tried to stop me, but with one of his energy sources gone, he wasn't quite himself. Plus the sun and light tend to play tricks." I see. I shall pay your payment, then." The mayor rose from the desk, still smoking a cigarette. He then extinguished the one he had in a tray, since it had reached its end, as he went to a nearby wall, where a locked safe could easily be seen. The dial was swung about, and then a key inserted into the doorway that allowed it to open. "I have a question for you, though." "What is it?" "Do you know a man by the name of Rapier?" Vass's eyes squinted. His hand went for his gun as the mayor came out from behind the safe. There was a loud bang, followed by another. End of part 1 of a drawn-out fight. Thank you for listening.